My in-laws drove off without me during a family vacation, laughing as I chased the car. My wife yelled, "Walk it off." So I walked straight to a lawyer, uncovered her father's secret fraud, and took everything. My wife's family drove off without me on a desolate mountain road during a family vacation, laughing hysterically while they did it. My wife rolled down the window, looked me dead in the eye, and shouted, "Walk it off." Like I was a stray dog they were trying to lose in the woods. 5 years later, she knocked on my front door, completely broken, and saw exactly who was standing beside me. My name is Ryan, and I am 33 years old. To understand how I ended up stranded on the shoulder of a 2-lane highway in the Adirondacks with no cell service, a dying phone battery, and a sudden, terrifying sense of absolute clarity, I need to give you some context about the 7 years I spent in a psychological hostage situation disguised as a marriage. I met Chloe when we were in college. She was 22, I was 23. She had this infectious, room-brightening laugh that made you feel like you were the only person in the world who mattered. We got married at 26. Yes, it was young, but I was completely infatuated with her, and she seemed to feel the exact same way about me. But as I would eventually learn the hard way, the word seemed was doing an incredible amount of heavy lifting in our relationship. I grew up working class. My dad passed away when I was young, and my mom worked double shifts as a nurse to keep the lights on. I put myself through university by working night shifts loading trucks at a freight terminal. I graduated with a degree in data analytics, which isn't exactly the most glamorous field in the world, but I was damn good at it. By the time I was 29, I was making very solid money as a senior data analyst for a mid-sized fintech firm. I was incredibly proud of the life I had built from absolutely nothing. Nobody ever handed me a single dime. Chloe's family was the exact opposite. They weren't billionaire wealthy, but they desperately lived like they were. Her father, Arthur, had retired from an upper management position at a corporate logistics firm and carried himself with the unearned arrogance of a man who believed he had personally invented modern commerce. Her mother, Helen, was the kind of country club socialite who orchestrated every single holiday, vacation, and Sunday dinner with military precision, expecting endless gratitude as if her mere presence was a charitable donation to the less fortunate. Then there was Derek, Chloe's younger brother. Derek was 29, worked a fake consulting job at a firm owned by Arthur's closest golfing buddy, drove a leased Audi that his parents entirely paid for, and somehow still acted like he was the smartest, most accomplished self-made entrepreneur in any room he walked into. For the first few years of my marriage, I genuinely tried with these people. I bent over backwards to fit in. I showed up to every mandatory Sunday dinner, every agonizing holiday gathering, and every random Tuesday barbecue Helen demanded we attend. I always brought an expensive bottle of wine. I always offered to help clean the kitchen. I asked Arthur about his golf swing and sat in agonizing silence while Derek lectured me about his cryptocurrency portfolio as if he were giving a keynote speech at a financial summit. It was never, ever enough. Arthur had this insidious habit of making tiny, condescending comments. They were never outright insults that you could easily call out. They were more like emotional paper cuts. He'd ask me how work was going, and when I'd mention a new data modeling project, he'd smirk, swirl his scotch, and say, "So, you just stare at spreadsheets all day? Must be thrilling." Then he'd chuckle and share a knowing glance with Derek, like I was the punchline to an inside joke I wasn't smart enough to understand. Or, he would loudly bring up how he just helped Chloe's cousin's husband secure a vice president role at a massive firm, turn to me, and say, "You know, Ryan, if you ever decide you want to do something a bit more professional with your life, just let me know. I can make a few calls." He said this to a man making 6 figures, treating me like I was a high school kid bagging his groceries. Helen was much more subtle, but arguably more toxic. She would conveniently forget to tell me that the time for a family dinner had changed, resulting in me showing up an hour late and looking irresponsible. She would meticulously rearrange the seating charts at Thanksgiving so that I was always placed at the very end of the table, usually wedged between the bathroom door and a toddler who couldn't hold a conversation. When Chloe and I bought our house, a beautiful, 4-bedroom property in a highly desirable suburb, Helen walked through the front door, looked around with a tight smile, and marriage. I didn't suffer in silence, either. I wasn't one of those guys who bottled everything up until he exploded. I communicated. I sat Chloe down on multiple occasions, completely calm, and explained exactly how her family's behavior made me feel. I used I statements. I gave her specific, undeniable examples of their disrespect. I even begged her to go to couples counseling with me. But every single time, Chloe would get this blank, genuinely confused look on her face, like I was describing a color she couldn't see. She would tell me I was being overly sensitive, that I was reading too much into innocent comments, and that her family loved me. They didn't love me, they barely tolerated me. They tolerated me purely because Chloe had chosen me, and they were quietly, patiently waiting for her to unchoose me so they could get their daughter back under their absolute control. The breaking point arrived during a family vacation that Arthur had planned. He had rented a massive, sprawling lake house in the Adirondacks for an entire week. Because he was paying for the rental, he made sure everyone was painfully aware that he was the benevolent king hosting his loyal subjects. He dictated the schedule, the meals, and the activities. Chloe was ecstatic. Derek was bringing his new girlfriend, Sarah, a woman who spent the entire first dinner staring blankly at her phone. Helen had created a laminated itinerary for the week. I explicitly told Chloe I did not want to go. I told her that being trapped in a house with her family for 7 days was going to be a disaster for my mental health. She gave me that familiar look of profound disappointment, the look that communicated I was the problem, the dark cloud ruining her sunshine. "It's a free vacation, Ryan," she snapped. "Can you please just try to be a part of this family for once?" So, against every instinct in my body, I went. For the first 2 days, it was a tolerable nightmare. Arthur only made 4 passive-aggressive comments about my salary. Helen only accidentally assigned Chloe and me the smallest bedroom in the basement with a mattress that felt like a sack of damp gravel. Derek only interrupted me 3 times to brag about his gym routine. I kept my head down, drank a lot of coffee, and tried to survive. Day 3 is when the illusion of my marriage finally shattered. We were all supposed to drive into the nearest town, which was about 40 minutes away, to stock up on groceries and supplies. Everyone piled into Arthur's rented luxury SUV. Arthur and Helen were in the front, Derek was in the driver's seat, and Sarah and Chloe were in the middle row. I was the last one out of the house because Helen had specifically asked me to grab the massive, heavy Yeti cooler from the back porch. I was walking down the long, steep gravel driveway, carrying this heavy blue cooler with both hands, when I heard the SUV's engine roar to life. I picked up my pace, the gravel crunching under my boots. The SUV started rolling forward. "Hey! Hold on, I'm right here," I yelled out, jogging toward the vehicle. Through the windshield, I saw Derek look at me in the rearview mirror. A massive, malicious grin spread across his face. He tapped the gas pedal. The SUV sped up, not peeling out, but moving just fast enough to stay exactly 20 feet ahead of me. I started running, the heavy cooler banging painfully against my knees. "Derek, stop the car," I shouted. Through the open windows, the sound of their collective laughter spilled out into the humid mountain air. I heard Arthur's booming, authoritative laugh. I heard Helen's shrill, breathless giggling. I heard Derek howling. And then, the moment that will be burned into my memory until the day I die. Chloe rolled down the window of the middle row. She leaned her head out, looked back at me sweating and struggling with the cooler, and yelled, "Walk it off, Ryan." The entire car erupted into another fit of hysterical laughter. Derek hit the gas, the SUV turned onto the main 2-lane highway, and they disappeared around the bend, leaving me standing in a cloud of dust. I stood there on the shoulder of that desolate road for a long, long time. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the cooler into the woods. I didn't curse. I just slowly set the cooler down in the dirt, walked back up the driveway, sat on the wooden steps of the porch, and stared out at the water. Something inside my chest just clicked. It was the quietest, most profound feeling I have ever experienced. The anxiety, the frustration, the desperate need to be accepted by these people, it all just evaporated. I pulled out my phone. 1 bar of service. I called Chloe. It went straight to voicemail. I waited 20 minutes and called again. Nothing. An hour passed. Then 2 hours. I sat on those steps for over 2 hours, completely abandoned. When my phone finally buzzed, it was Chloe. I answered. I could hear the clinking of silverware and background chatter. They were at a restaurant. "Ryan, oh my God, are you still at the cabin?" she asked, her voice entirely devoid of concern, actually bubbling with leftover amusement. "Derek was just messing around. We were going to turn around, but then we saw this cute brunch place and got sidetracked. Are you mad?" I wasn't mad. That is what terrified me. I felt a cold, absolute clarity. "I'm fine," I said, my voice completely flat. "Enjoy your brunch." I hung up the phone. I didn't block her number. I just turned the phone completely off. I walked inside, packed my duffel bag, and turned my phone back on just long enough to call my best friend, Julian. "Hey man," I said when he picked up. "I need a massive favor. Can you drive up to the Adirondacks and come get me? I'm done. My marriage is over." Julian didn't hesitate. He drove 4.5 hours upstate to come get me. When he pulled into the driveway, he didn't ask a single probing question. He just loaded my bag into his trunk, looked at me, and said, "Do you want to vent, or do you want to sit in silence and eat fast food?" "Both," I replied. We ended up sitting in the parking lot of a Wendy's somewhere outside of Albany, eating fries on the hood of his car while I told him every single detail of what had just happened. Julian listened silently, chewing his food. When I finished, he looked at me and delivered the truest statement I have ever heard. "Ryan," he said softly, "the problem isn't that her family is a bunch of abusive narcissists. The problem is that Chloe genuinely thinks this is a normal way to treat someone you love. You're not in a marriage, man. You're a hostage. He was exactly right. I texted Chloe a brief message letting her know I had gone back home to the city and that we would talk when she returned. She called me 4 times in a row. I ignored all of them. Finally, she sent a text. Are you seriously going to throw a tantrum and ruin my family's vacation over a harmless joke? Grow up. I didn't reply. I spent the next 5 days alone in our house, packing up my emotional baggage and preparing for war. When Chloe finally came home, she walked through the front door looking tanned, relaxed, and incredibly annoyed. I was sitting at the kitchen island, drinking a cup of black coffee. She dropped her designer luggage in the hallway, marched into the kitchen, and immediately went on the offensive. Before you even start, she snapped, crossing her arms, I want you to know how completely humiliated I was. I had to explain to my parents why my husband is so fragile that he ran away in the middle of a family trip. I didn't run away, Chloe, I said, my voice eerily calm. Your brother drove off and abandoned me on the side of a highway, and you laughed in my face. It was a joke, Ryan. Derek was going to loop back around. You just overreacted and threw a pity party before he had the chance. He didn't loop back around, Chloe. I sat on that porch for over 2 hours. You didn't answer your phone. You went and ate brunch. She rolled her eyes, doing the exact same mental gymnastics I had watched her perform 1,000 times before. She was actively recalculating the narrative in her head, twisting the facts until her family was completely innocent and I was the villain. We got hungry, she deflected. We were coming back. You are making a massive deal out of literally nothing. I looked at her, truly looked at her, and realized there was nothing left to salvage. I want a divorce, I said. The entire house went dead silent. The annoyance completely vanished from Chloe's face, replaced by pure, unadulterated shock. Her arms uncrossed and fell to her sides. You. What? She whispered. I want a divorce. This isn't about the car, Chloe. This is about 7 years of being treated like garbage, and you choosing to defend your abusers every single time. I'm done. Ryan, you can't just throw our marriage away over a joke, she pleaded, her voice cracking as tears finally started welling in her eyes. It was never a joke, Chloe, and I am entirely out of ways to explain that to you. She started crying in earnest, standing next to her suitcase in the hallway. A year ago, I would have rushed over, pulled her into my arms, and apologized for upsetting her. But the man who sat on that porch for 2 hours didn't move a single inch. She moved into the guest bedroom that night. Over the next week, I listened through the thin walls as she called her parents, weeping, cycling through anger, denial, and bargaining. One night, I heard her on speakerphone with Helen. Mom, he's serious. He's actually talking to lawyers, Chloe sobbed. Then, Helen's voice echoed through the phone, perfectly clear and dripping with venom. Oh, sweetheart, stop crying. Let the boy throw his little tantrum, he's not going anywhere. Where would he even go? He has no real family, and he certainly can't afford that lifestyle without us. Just ignore him until he cools off. That comment stung, I won't lie. But it also confirmed exactly what I was dealing with. They didn't view me as a human being. They viewed me as an unruly pet that just needed to be ignored until it stopped barking. The next morning, I met with a divorce attorney named Marcus. Marcus was a shark calm, incredibly thorough, and completely devoid of emotion. During our first meeting, we went through all the standard procedures: assets, debts, bank accounts, and the house. That is when everything blew up. Marcus asked me to bring all the documentation regarding our home mortgage. I brought the original purchase agreement, the closing documents, the title paperwork, everything. He spread them out across his massive oak desk and started meticulously reviewing them. About 20 minutes into the meeting, Marcus suddenly stopped. He frowned, picked up a single sheet of paper, adjusted his glasses, and looked at me. Ryan, Marcus asked slowly, did you have a cosigner on your mortgage? No, I replied immediately. Chloe and I qualified entirely on our own. My credit was perfect, and our combined income was more than enough. Marcus turned the piece of paper around and slid it across the desk toward me. It was a document titled Guarantor and Equity Stake Addendum. It was a supplementary legal document that had been filed with the county and attached to the mortgage. The signature on the bottom line belonged to Arthur, my father-in-law. I stared at the paper, my blood running cold. I have never seen this document in my life. My signature isn't even on it. How is this possible? I signed every single paper at the closing table. Marcus leaned back in his leather chair, steepling his fingers. This addendum was not part of your standard closing package. According to the county timestamps, this was filed 3 days times after times your closing date. It was submitted directly to the lender and the county clerk by someone who had intimate access to your real estate file, likely a title agent or a notary. Why the hell would Arthur secretly co-sign my mortgage? I asked, my head spinning. Control, Marcus said flatly. By filing this guarantor addendum, your father-in-law legally attached himself to the financial liability of this property. While it doesn't give him direct ownership on the deed, it gives him immense legal leverage. If you ever wanted to refinance, sell the house, or take out a line of credit, the lender would require his authorization. He effectively put a leash on your biggest financial asset. Can he do that legally? Absolutely not. Marcus said, his eyes narrowing. If you, as the primary borrower, did not consent to this, and your signature is nowhere on this addendum, this is textbook mortgage fraud. Whoever notarized and filed this committed a felony. I sat in that freezing air-conditioned office, holding a piece of paper that proved my father-in-law had secretly infiltrated my finances 6 years ago. Suddenly, every single comment Arthur had ever made about our house made sickening sense. That house is a bit much for you too, isn't it? If you ever need help with the mortgage, you know who to call. They weren't making idle conversation. They were mocking me. They knew they had me trapped, and they thought I was too stupid to ever find out. What do we do? I asked, my voice trembling with rage. Marcus carefully took the document back and placed it in a red folder. For now, absolutely nothing. You go home. You act completely normal. You don't say a word to your wife or her family. I am going to bring in a real estate litigation expert, and we are going to quietly investigate exactly how this was filed. We are going to build a nuclear bomb, Ryan. And when we drop it, they won't even see the plane. Update 1. The next 2 months were the greatest acting performance of my entire life. I went to work, I came home. I ate dinner at the kitchen island, while Chloe sat in the living room. I was perfectly polite. I asked about her day. I made small talk. Chloe, likely coached by Helen, started being incredibly sweet to me. She started making my favorite dinners. She bought me a new watch. She would gently touch my shoulder when she walked past me. She thought her mother was right. She thought my tantrum was over and I was slowly falling back into line. Meanwhile, every Tuesday and Thursday after work, I was sitting in a conference room with Marcus and a real estate litigation attorney named Evelyn. Evelyn was a bulldog who specialized in title fraud. Together, they completely dismantled the paper trail of Arthur's crime. Here is what they found. The fraudulent guarantor addendum had been processed and stamped by a notary named Brenda Carmichael. Evelyn's private investigator ran a background check on Brenda. Brenda was a title agent who just so happened to sit on the same country club charity committee as my mother-in-law, Helen. Brenda had abused her position at the title company to quietly slide Arthur's forged addendum into the final stack of documents sent to the county clerk, completely bypassing my knowledge or consent. This is incredibly severe, Ryan, Evelyn told me during our final investigative meeting. Arthur signed a legally binding financial instrument without the primary borrower's consent, and Brenda notarized it fraudulently. This is wire fraud, mortgage fraud, and notary fraud. If we hand this over to the district attorney, Arthur could face actual prison time. At the very least, he will be destroyed financially. Did Chloe know? I asked, dreading the answer. Marcus sighed. We can't prove that she did. Her signature isn't on the fraudulent documents either. However, she has spent 6 years living in this house and has never once mentioned that her father is legally tethered to your mortgage. You have to decide what you believe. I had already decided. Whether Chloe knew about the fraud or was just a pawn in her family's sick game of control didn't matter anymore. The marriage was dead. The climax of this waiting game happened on a random Thursday evening. I was sitting on the couch reading when my phone rang. It was Arthur. He hadn't called me directly in over 3 years. I hit accept. Hello, Arthur. Ryan, my boy. Arthur boomed, his voice dripping with fake, patriarchal warmth. Listen, Helen and I were talking. We know things got a little heated up at the lake house. You know how Derek is, boys will be boys, just harmless ribbing. Derek feels terrible about the whole misunderstanding. Does he? I asked smoothly. Of course he does. We're family, Ryan. You can't let a tiny little joke break up a beautiful marriage. You need to be a man, step up, and fix this with my daughter. In fact, Helen wants you two to come over for Sunday dinner. Clean slate. What do you say? I sat there, listening to this arrogant, entitled man try to manipulate me, completely unaware that I was holding a folder containing the evidence to put him in a federal courtroom. I appreciate the call, Arthur, I said evenly. I'll think about it. Good man, Arthur chuckled. See you Sunday. I hung up the phone, texted Marcus a single word, execute. The following Tuesday, at exactly 10 a.m., the trap slammed shut. I requested to have the divorce petition served to Chloe directly at her office. I didn't do it to humiliate her, I did it because I knew exactly how she would react, and I wanted a buffer. At 10:45 a.m., my phone started vibrating violently on my desk. It was Chloe. I walked into an empty conference room and answered. You filed? She asked, her voice completely hollow. I did. You actually served me with divorce papers at my job, Ryan? I thought we were getting better. I thought you were over this. We were never getting better, Chloe. I was just getting ready. The marriage has been over since the moment you told me to walk it off. I'm just making it legal. She hung up on me. Exactly 30 minutes later, my phone rang again. This time, it was Arthur. And he was absolutely losing his mind. What the hell is wrong with you? Arthur roared through the speaker. Chloe is completely hysterical. Helen is having a panic attack. You file for divorce after everything this family has done for you? You ungrateful little punk. I let him scream. I let him rant about how much they had provided for me, how I was nothing without them. When he finally ran out of breath, I spoke, my voice cold as ice. Arthur, check your email, and then check the front desk of your country club. A courier just dropped something off for you. What are you talking about? He spat. My attorney, Marcus, just sent a formal demand letter to your personal attorney. It outlines, in excruciating detail, the fraudulent guarantor addendum you filed on my mortgage 6 years ago. It also names Brenda Carmichael, the notary who helped you commit federal mortgage fraud. I strongly suggest you stop yelling at me and call a criminal defense lawyer. The silence on the other end of the phone was the most beautiful sound I have ever heard in my life. The absolute, suffocating silence of a narcissist realizing he has stepped into a bear trap. Ryan, Arthur stammered, all the booming bravado completely vanishing. I'll see you in mediation, Arthur. Don't ever call my phone again. I hung up. Update 2. The fallout was biblical. Within 48 hours, the entire dynamic of Chloe's untouchable family completely collapsed. Arthur's attorney, a high-priced corporate lawyer, reviewed the evidence Evelyn had compiled and immediately realized his client was standing on a legal landmine. Arthur had initially lied to his lawyer, claiming he co-signed the house because Chloe and I were too poor to qualify and begged for his help. But Evelyn provided our pristine financial records showing we qualified independently. The fraud was undeniable. Derek, the golden boy, actually called me that weekend, practically begging. Hey, Ryan, man, listen, my dad is losing his mind. He's talking about going to jail. Can we settle this family stuff out of court? Come on, man to man. Is it family stuff when you abandon me on a highway, Derek? I asked. Or is it only family stuff when your dad commits a felony and gets caught? Tell Arthur to talk to my lawyer. I blocked his number. The following week, Chloe came back to the house to pack the rest of her things. She looked absolutely devastated. The smugness, the entitlement, the blind defense of her family, it was all gone. She stood in the kitchen, holding a box of her clothes, and looked at me with red, swollen eyes. Did my dad really forge documents on our house? She whispered. Yes, Chloe. He did. And he used one of your mom's country club friends to do it. How long have you known? Since the week after you laughed at me from the window of that SUV. She dropped her gaze to the floor. For the first time in 7 years, I watched the defensive walls of her family mythology crumble in real time. She realized that her father wasn't a benevolent protector, he was a controlling criminal. She realized her mother wasn't just forgetful, she was actively malicious. And she realized that by constantly defending them, she had driven away the only person who actually loved her unconditionally. I didn't know about the mortgage, Ryan. I swear to God I didn't know, she sobbed. I believe you, I said softly. But you knew about everything else, and that's why we're here. The settlement mediation was a bloodbath. Arthur didn't even have the courage to show up in person, he sent his lawyer. Because we held the ultimate trump card, the threat of handing the fraud evidence over to the district attorney, Arthur capitulated to every single demand we made. The fraudulent addendum was legally voided. Arthur was forced to sign a sworn affidavit admitting the filing was unauthorized. Brenda, the corrupt notary, was reported to the state licensing board and immediately lost her job and her credentials. I kept the house entirely, with full equity, and Chloe didn't fight for a single dime of it. Her own divorce attorney took one look at the fraud evidence and advised her to walk away quietly before she got dragged into the criminal exposure. The day the divorce was finalized, Chloe asked to speak to me in the hallway outside the courtroom. We stood under the flickering fluorescent lights, two strangers who used to share a life. I'm so sorry, Ryan, she whispered. For not listening to you. For letting them treat you like that. I was so blind. I hope you figure it out, Chloe, I really do. But you can't heal in the same environment that made you sick. We shook hands, and I walked out of that courthouse feeling a weight lift off my chest that I didn't even realize I had been carrying for 7 years. 5 years later. I am 38 now. A lot has changed. I sold that massive house a year after the divorce, made a fantastic profit, and bought a beautiful, modern townhouse closer to the city. I was promoted twice and am now the director of data analytics for my firm. It is amazing how much energy and ambition you have when you aren't spending 90% of your mental capacity surviving a toxic family system. 3 years ago, I met Maya. She is a veterinarian who runs a local animal rescue clinic. We met during a torrential downpour when I helped her coax a terrified stray dog out from under a parked car. Maya is everything Chloe wasn't. She is fiercely independent, deeply empathetic, and her kindness isn't a performance for social status, it's just who she is. When I finally told her the story of my divorce and the lake house incident, Maya didn't make excuses for them. She just held my hand and said, I am so sorry you had to endure that. They were monsters in golf polos. Maya and I live together now. Our life is quiet, peaceful, and filled with mutual respect. I hadn't heard a single word from Chloe or her family in 5 years. Through the grapevine, I heard that Derek got fired from his fake consulting job and moved back into Arthur's basement. Arthur's reputation in his social circles took a massive hit after the notary scandal leaked, and Helen was practically ostracized from her country club. I thought that chapter of my life was permanently closed. Until 3 months ago. It was a Saturday morning. Maya was in the kitchen, dancing to a jazz playlist in her pajamas, making her famous blueberry pancakes. I was sitting at the island, drinking coffee and watching her, feeling incredibly lucky. Suddenly, there was a tentative knock at the front door. I got up, walked to the foyer, and opened the door. Standing on my porch was Chloe. She looked entirely different. The polished, arrogant country club aesthetic was completely gone. She looked tired, older, and incredibly nervous. She was clutching her purse with both hands, shifting her weight awkwardly. "Ryan," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "Hi, I'm sorry to just show up. I got your new address from Julian." Before I could even process what was happening, Maya walked up behind me, holding a spatula. She stopped when she saw Chloe. Maya knew exactly who she was. Chloe looked at Maya, then looked back at me. I saw a flash of absolute heartbreak cross Chloe's face. It wasn't just jealousy, it was the crushing realization that I had moved on, built a beautiful life, and she was now nothing more than an awkward ghost haunting my front porch. "Hi," Maya said, her voice polite but firm. "I'm Maya." "I know," Chloe whispered. I'm sorry to interrupt." I stepped out onto the porch and pulled the door halfway shut behind me. "What do you want, Chloe?" Chloe took a deep, shuddering breath. "My dad had a severe heart attack a few months ago. He survived, but it scared him. He's been doing this apology tour, I guess, trying to make amends. He wanted me to come here and tell you that he is deeply sorry for what he did with the mortgage. For all of it." I leaned against the brick pillar of my porch, staring at her. "He sent you to do his dirty work? Even after a heart attack, he's too much of a coward to apologize to my face." Chloe looked down at her shoes. "I volunteered to come, Ryan, because I needed to say something to you, too." She looked back up, tears brimming in her eyes. "I've been in intense therapy for 3 years. I finally see it. I see everything you were trying to tell me. My family is toxic. They abused you, and I enabled it because I was too brainwashed to stand up to them. I lost the best thing that ever happened to me because I thought a cruel joke was more important than my husband." She wiped a tear from her cheek. "You were right, Ryan, about all of it, and I am so sorry." I stood there, looking at the woman who had once been my entire world. 5 years ago, this apology would have meant everything to me. Now? It just felt like the final page of a book I had finished reading a long time ago. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt an overwhelming sense of peace. "Thank you for saying that, Chloe," I said gently. "I genuinely appreciate it. I hope you continue healing." She offered a sad, broken smile. "Are you happy, Ryan?" I looked back through the glass of the front door. I could see Maya at the stove, flipping a pancake, completely unbothered, securing the safe, warm home we had built together. "Yeah, Chloe," I said. "I really am." She nodded, took a step back off the porch, and wrapped her arms around herself. "You always deserved better. Goodbye, Ryan." "Goodbye, Chloe." I watched her get into her car and drive away, disappearing down the suburban street. I stood on the porch for a few moments, taking a deep breath of the crisp morning air, feeling the weight of the past finally dissolve into nothing. I walked back inside and locked the door. Maya slid a plate of perfect blueberry pancakes across the kitchen island toward me. She didn't ask a million frantic questions. She didn't demand to know what was said. She just poured me a fresh cup of coffee, kissed my cheek, and smiled. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I smiled, taking a bite of the pancakes. "Everything is absolutely perfect." Top comments. User 1, the absolute audacity of your father-in-law to commit federal mortgage fraud and then call you up demanding you be a man and apologize for being upset about getting stranded. The sheer delusion of these wealthy narcissists is staggering. So glad you got out and crushed him legally. User 2, walk it off. Well, you walked right into a lawyer's office and walked away with the whole damn house. This is the most satisfying karma I've read in a long time. Chloe realizing she threw away a good man for a family that views her as property is tragic, but she earned that misery. User 3, your new partner Maya sounds amazing. The contrast between a family that treats you like a punching bag and a partner who stands by you peacefully is beautiful. Let Derek enjoy his crypto losses in his dad's basement while you live your best life.